This is the Siberian Taiga, 1,000,000 square kilometers of dense, unforgiving wilderness. Locals call it the Green Sea, or sometimes the Bear's Kitchen. If you get lost here, you don't survive. The forest is absolute, the predators are real, and the cold is lethal. In July 2014, this endless green ocean swallowed a child. Karina Chikitova wasn't even 4 years old. She vanished into the thickest part of the forest. She had no food, no water, and no survival gear. She was wearing only a t-shirt and leggings. Almost immediately, she lost her shoes, leaving her barefoot against the brutal terrain. For 12 days, one of the largest search operations in Siberian history found nothing. Helicopters, drones, and elite trackers couldn't locate her. The odds were mathematically zero. It is impossible for a toddler to survive alone for that long in this environment. Hope was gone. Rescuers were preparing to search for a body. Then, a muddy, starving dog limped back into the village. It was Karina's puppy. The rescuers' hearts sank. If the loyal dog had abandoned the child, it meant the child was dead. But they were wrong. The dog hadn't abandoned her, it had made an agonizing choice. It had come back for help. And what they found when they followed her dog back in the taiga defied every law of survival. This is the story of an unbreakable bond and a resilience that shocked the world. This story takes place in Yakutia, the Sakha Republic, Siberia. It is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. It's massive, nearly the size of India, but populated by less than 1,000,000 people. This means one thing: endless kilometers of emptiness. It is the coldest inhabited region on Earth. But this was July 2014. Summer in the taiga brings unique dangers. The ground thaws into treacherous swamps and impassable mud. The air fills with thick swarms of aggressive mosquitoes, and the predators wake up. The region has had one of the largest populations of Siberian brown bears in the world, and summer is their peak feeding season. The story begins in the tiny remote village of Olom. Only about 8 people live there permanently. It's completely isolated. There are no reliable phone lines, no mobile reception. Communication with the outside world is rare and difficult. Life here is tough, reliant on hunting, foraging, and survival skills passed down through the generations. Here lived Karina Chikitova, aged 3 years and 8 months. She was a resilient, energetic child used to the outdoors. She lived with her mother, Talina, her grandmother, and the family dog, a fluffy, incredibly smart Yakutian Laika mixed puppy that the family hadn't formally named yet, though Karina called her Naida. Karina was inseparable from the puppy. In a place like Olom, the dog wasn't just a pet, it was a guardian. On the morning of July 29th, 2014, everything seemed normal. Karina's father, Rodion, was preparing to leave the village. He was heading out to join volunteer firefighters battling the wildfires raging through the taiga. Talina was busy with chores. Karina was playing outside, supposedly supervised by her grandmother. This is where the first mistake happened. The grandmother, exhausted from the heat and the daily labor, briefly dozed off. While she slept, Karina decided she wanted to go with her father. She didn't understand he was traveling miles away. With the puppy trotting happily beside her, the little girl walked past the edge of the village and straight into the dense taiga. Rodion had no idea he was being followed. He walked quickly, focused on the journey ahead. Karina, trying to keep up, soon lost the path. Within minutes, the green sea closed around her, and the village vanished. Back in Olom, a catastrophic misunderstanding was unfolding. When the grandmother woke up, Karina was gone. She assumed Karina had gone inside with Talina. When Talina realized Karina was missing, she didn't immediately fear the worst. She assumed Rodion had decided to take Karina with him when he left. It seemed plausible. It was a casual assumption, the kind made every day in a small community. But Rodion hadn't taken her. He assumed Karina was safe at home. Because of the lack of communication, this misunderstanding wasn't temporary confusion, it became a devastating delay. This simple error bought the wilderness 4 days. July 30th, 24 hours missing, Talina felt a slight unease, but assumed Karina was safe. July 31st, 48 hours missing, still no word. It wasn't until 4 full days had passed, 96 hours, that Talina managed to get a message to Rodion. The conversation was brief, but the realization was instant and terrifying. "How is Karina?" Rodion was confused. "What do you mean? She's not with me." The realization hit Talina like a physical blow. Her 3-year-old daughter had been missing for 4 days and nobody had known. The alarm was raised immediately. The situation was instantly classified as critical. This wasn't an urban disappearance, this was the taiga. The Sakha Republic Emergency Services mobilized a massive search operation. Over 100 people descended on Olom. Professional rescuers, local hunters, and desperate volunteers. The search area was immense and hostile. The terrain was a nightmare of thick underbrush, fallen trees, and mosquito-infested swamps. Visibility was often limited to just a few meters. Helicopters and drones were deployed, scanning the endless canopy, but the forest was just too dense. From the air, it was impossible to see anything on the ground, especially something as small as a child. Worse still, they faced an unexpected obstacle. The noise of the helicopters and the shouting didn't attract Karina. It terrified her. The roar of the engines sounded like a massive predator. Instinct took over. She wasn't running towards help. She was actively hiding from the people trying to save her, instinctively camouflaging herself in the tall grass. This made her invisible not only from the air, but also to the ground teams just meters away. The rescuers faced another terrifying obstacle: bears. The threat was so severe that armed special forces units had to accompany these search teams. Their job wasn't to search for Karina, it was to protect the searchers from being attacked. At one point, a massive brown bear confronted the main search camp and had to be scared off with warning shots. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. They were looking for a needle in a haystack while simultaneously being hunted. The situation got even worse. The specialized tracking dogs brought in by the rescuers refused to work. They were terrified of the overwhelming scent of bears in the area and kept circling back to the village, too scared to enter the deep woods. The rescuers were on their own. Afanasy Nikolaev, a spokesperson for the Sakha Rescue Services, stated the grim reality. The forest around Olom is full of bears. A grown man would be scared to walk there alone, let alone a small child. Day 5. The first full day of searching. The teams spread out, calling Karina's name. Their voices were muffled by the thick trees, and they found nothing. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Karina was surviving by instinct. She wasn't panicking, she was adapting. She knew how to find food. Growing up in this environment meant she wasn't entirely helpless. She recognized the wild berries, wild currants, and blueberries. These became her only sustenance. When she got thirsty, she found streams and drank the cold, clear water. This was risky. The water likely contained parasites, but dehydration would kill her faster. Her first challenge was the environment itself. Early in her journey, Karina lost her shoes while navigating the sucking mud of the swamps, and she was now barefoot. Her small feet were cut and bruised by sharp rocks and thorny bushes. But the nights were the real enemy. The temperature in this region of Siberia plummets after sunset, often dropping close to freezing, around 5 to 6 degrees Celsius, or 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia was a constant threat. This is where the puppy became more than a companion. The puppy became a lifeline. Every night, Karina would find a sheltered spot. She sought out areas of tall, fire-resistant grass. She burrowed into the grass, creating a makeshift bed or nest. Then She curled up with the puppy. The dog's thick fur and body heat provided the crucial warmth that kept Karina alive through the freezing nights. Without the dog, she would have died of exposure on the very first night. The puppy also provided protection. While the small dog was no match for a bear or a wolf pack, her aggressive barking and scent might have been enough to deter curious predators. A lone toddler is easy prey. A toddler with a protective dog is a different proposition. The puppy was her heater and her alarm system. Day 6. The search intensified. The pressure was mounting. They found the first sign, a small footprint in the mud near a riverbank. It was definitely Karina's. Hope surged through the camp, but the footprint led to the water, and the trail vanished. Day 7, 1 week missing, the mood in the search camp turned grim. The volunteers were exhausted physically and emotionally. Talina, Karina's mother, was devastated. The weight of the guilt, the misunderstanding, the 4-day-long delay was crushing her. She barely ate or slept. She participated in the search, calling her daughter's name until her voice was gone, wandering the edges of the forest. She kept repeating, "She must be so cold and so scared." The authorities started to prepare for the worst. The experienced hunters knew the chances were negligible. They were sure they were now looking for a body. But Karina was still alive. She was getting weaker, thinner, and was covered in insect bites. The mosquitoes in the taiga are relentless. Her face, arms, and legs were swollen, scratched, and becoming infected. Day 8. Experienced hunters analyzed animal behavior, looking for signs that something unusual was happening in the forest. They looked for disturbed bird flocks or areas where predators were concentrating. Still nothing. Then, on day 9, a breakthrough happened. But it felt like the final blow. In the early morning, a dog limped back into the village of Olom. It was the puppy. She was exhausted, muddy, and starving. But she was alone. When the rescuers saw the dog return without Karina, the reaction was immediate devastation. In Siberian culture, the bond between a person and their dog is sacred. If the dog had left the child's side, it meant only one thing. If the girl was alive, the dog would have stayed with her, guarding her, Nikolaev stated. So when the dog returned, we thought that was it. The end of the story. Talina collapsed in grief. The search seemed over. But the puppy was behaving strangely. She wasn't acting like a dog that had abandoned its owner. The rescuers tried to feed her, but she refused the food. She was agitated, barking, and trying to pull the rescuers back toward the forest. She was trying to communicate. The realization hit the local hunters. The dog hadn't abandoned Karina. Karina was growing weaker, though, no longer moving much, staying hidden in her grassy nest. The dog knew the child was dying. The dog faced an impossible choice. Every instinct screamed at her to stay close, to warm the dying child. But staying meant they would both die. The dog had to take an agonizing risk, leave the child alone without warmth or protection. In that moment, the dog made a decision that defied its nature. It wasn't abandonment, though. It was a desperate rescue mission. Hope was suddenly reignited. This was their first real lead in 9 days. They immediately assembled a team to follow the dog. They now officially named the dog Naida, which means found in the Yakut language. But Naida was exhausted and struggled to retrace the exact path. The scent trail was faint after 9 days of wind and changing weather. Days 10 and 11. Crucially, a new clock was ticking. The search focused intensely on an area about 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles from the village. Karina had now spent 2 nights alone in the freezing taiga without the dog's warmth. They knew they had hours, maybe less. Hypothermia must be setting in. The rescuers changed tactics. Instead of shouting and using loud equipment, they moved in smaller, quieter groups, trying to avoid scaring Karina into hiding. They found more signs, barefoot footprints, a recent grassy nest where she had clearly slept. They were agonizingly close. August 9th, 2014. Day 12. The morning started like the others. The teams spread out in a grid pattern, forcing their way through the reeds and tall grass. Artyom Borisov, a volunteer rescuer, was leading one of the groups. They had been searching for hours without any success. This area had been searched before, but the grass made visibility near zero. It was around 11 a.m. when Borisov signaled for silence. He saw a small mound in the grass, a flash of color that didn't belong. He crept forward, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure what he was about to find. He parted the tall blades of grass and looked down. There she was. Karina was sitting in her nest of grass. She was silent. She was so small, so weak, she looked like a tiny, frightened animal. Borisov was stunned. He called her name softly. She slowly lifted her head. Her face was pale, thin, and covered in bites. Her eyes were huge, dull with exhaustion, but unmistakably alive. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just looked at him. Borisov, overwhelmed with emotion, scooped her up. She was incredibly light. She weighed only about 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. When they reached her, the condition of the 3-year-old shocked the hardened rescuers. Her clothes were ragged and filthy. Her skin was a horrifying mosaic of mosquito and horsefly bites. Every exposed inch of her body was swollen, infected, and raw. Her bare feet were shredded, bleeding and blue from the cold, and she was shivering uncontrollably. She stretched out her arms. The first thing she asked for was water. Then she asked for juice and ice cream. The radio crackled to life with a message the entire Republic had been waiting for. Found her. She's alive. The news spread like wildfire. Back in the operational base and in the village, the reaction was disbelief, followed by overwhelming joy. Hardened rescuers, men who had seen the worst the taiga could do, openly wept. Talina, who had been in a state of near collapse, burst into tears of relief. Karina was airlifted immediately to the specialized pediatric center in Yakutsk, the capital of the Sakha Republic. The doctors were astonished. Medically, her survival was a miracle. She was suffering from severe malnutrition, dehydration, and hypothermia. She had lost over a third of her body weight. But miraculously, she had no serious internal injuries, no broken bones, no signs of attack by bears or wolves. Dr. Tatyana Fedorova, who treated Karina, remarked, "She is an incredibly strong child. Her adaptation mechanisms were pushed to the limit, but she endured. In the environment she was in, her survival is almost unbelievable." Naida's protection had been absolute. Everyone agreed the dog was the critical factor. Without the warmth and protection Naida provided during those first critical 9 nights, Karina would have died within the first 48 hours. Karina's recovery was slow but steady. She spent 20 days in the hospital. Initially, she was quiet and withdrawn, suffering from acute stress reaction. Psychologists worked with her daily. She had nightmares about the forest. But slowly, her resilience shone through. She started eating, gaining weight, and talking again. When asked how she survived, her answers were simple and matter-of-fact. "I ate berries, I drank water, and Naida kept me warm." But there was one reunion left. Naida, the hero dog. When Naida was brought into the hospital room, the reaction was immediate. The dog was ecstatic, licking her face. Karina looked at the dog and said softly, "Why did you leave me?" It was a heartbreaking moment, highlighting the simple, profound bond between the child and the dog. Karina didn't understand the dog had left to save her. She only knew she had been left alone and cold. But the bond was unbreakable. Naida had saved her life, first by staying with her, and then by leaving her. A few months after her rescue, a bronze statue was erected at Yakutsk airport, and it's titled Girl with Dog. It depicts Karina standing defiantly with Naida sitting protectively beside her. It commemorates their incredible survival story. Lost in the most unforgiving wilderness on Earth, facing predators, starvation, and freezing temperatures, a 3-year-old girl defied death for 12 days, protected only by the warmth and loyalty of her dog. You won't believe what the people in these next two stories did to survive. Click now to see what they did to stay alive, and ask yourself, could you do the same? Subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon.